Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. So for today, I want to talk about, I think is a kind of a disturbing new trend I've noticed in the past few years. It started subtle and quiet, but I'm finding it's becoming more and more evident lately. Financial advisors being increasingly critical of the fees that other advisors charge. So an example of this, on the Financial Advisor Success podcast, we recently had Dana Onspach, who has a niche financial planning business serving retirees with an incredibly well-defined process for working with retirees, and she charges a 1.25% AUM fee. And I heard a lot of critical comments about her podcast episode from other financial advisors who made statements like, she charges 1.25%. How can you be a fiduciary and charge 1.25% when everyone knows that the typical advisory fee is just 1%? Now, first and foremost, I think it's crucial to point out that the fiduciary duty does not actually require you to be the lowest cost provider. That is a myth. What the rule actually says is that you must charge fees commensurate to your services that are not excessive to the going market rate for similar services. And the key point here is that whether fees are excessive or not depends on the going market rate for similar services, which means that there's no requirement to be cheaper than everybody else. You can be more expensive as long as you do more or provide more or have higher quality or more specialized expertise or services to justify it. ERISA attorney Fred Reich has a great analogy for this. He says, under the fiduciary rule, you can sell Walmart services for Walmart prices. You can sell Tiffany services for Tiffany's prices. Just don't sell Walmart services for Tiffany's prices. That would be excessive. In the context of Dana's firm, when I look at her business, what I see is a unique, differentiated, specialized service for retirees. And as a result, she's grown from about $30 million to $130 million in AUM in just the past 5 years, charging 1.25% and an upfront financial planning fee of $6,900 for her initial retirement planning process. Which means, simply put, the people who actually pay the fees aren't finding them to be excessive. Retirees are finding them to be good value for what Dana provides, thus her rapid growth. The only ones sniping at her about her fees, and whether they're too high, are other advisors who imply, or in one case outright said to me, why would someone work with Dana at 1.25% when I offer retirement planning to my clients and I charge a more reasonable 1% instead? Now, the irony of the advisor making the statement to me is really striking. Because think about it for a moment. If a client came to you and said, hey, I'm not sure I should work with you anymore. I found another advisor who charges 0.25% less, and I think I'm going to make the switch. What would you say? You respond, no. You can't just compare financial advisors on cost alone. You have to look at our experience, the services we provide. That other advisor won't do for you what I do for you. Of course, my fees are reasonable. In other words, we routinely urge clients not to shop based just on the price of the advisor alone. We tell them to shop based on value, not just the cost, but what you get for the cost. Now, that's great when the client says they're leaving you for another advisor who's cheaper, so you make the case based on value. Except it doesn't work out so well when the other advisor is actually the more expensive one and charges the higher fees. Right? When the other advisor is more expensive, now all of a sudden it's just about the fees, and that my fee is reasonable and the other advisor's fee is excessive. But the real problem here is that by the time the conversation comes to fee comparisons, you've already lost the client. You've already lost. You know why? Because you've left the domain of competing on value and you're competing on price instead. And as I've written in the past about this blog, and no great secret, competing on price eventually becomes a serious problem, certainly for most advisory firms. Maybe Amazon can do it because they're going to scale to $1 trillion. Advisory firms are small. We cannot compete on price and scale. And it gets even worse because when you compete on price, particularly in today's environment, you tend to attract price-sensitive, fee-conscious clients, the kind who will pick you because you're 10 basis points cheaper than someone else, and the kind who will leave you as soon as some other competitor comes along who's 10 basis points cheaper than you. But again, the real problem is that when you focus on competing with price, you're not competing on your actual value anymore. You're not differentiating based on your skills, your services, your niche, or what you do for clients. You're just competing on price, which is just not a sustainable differentiator for most advisory firms, because there's always someone who's going to figure out how to charge less than you, even if it's because they do less than you. Because if all you differentiate on is price, your clients won't care that other advisors charge less and do less, because it's not about the value for them. It's just about the other advisor charges less, especially when you make it about price. So why are so many advisors starting to compete on price, such that there's an increasing amount of sniping at other advisors' fee schedules that happen to be a little higher than their own? I think it basically comes down to this. Most of us who've been in the business for any period of time are not actually used to primarily selling ourselves and our value as the advisor, because we got trained in selling products. And we have, I think, is a kind of a giant collective confidence problem in our own value proposition. We're afraid to price ourselves for what we're really worth. So instead we try to price below our competition says they're worth and compete on price instead of value. And this is actually starting to show up in the industry data as well. So Bob Veras did a recent study on advisor fees. We wrote about it earlier this week and found that advisors who have less than 5 years of experience charge the least, and advisors who have more than 20 years of experience charge the most. In fact, the median all-in cost of a financial advisor rises by 10% in just the first 5 years. From their study found about 1.35% of all-in costs, including the underlying stuff, to 1.5% of all-in costs. So in other words, as advisors get their first clients and some experience and some confidence, they tend to raise their fees. We've seen something very similar in XY Plying Network. We just launched our first annual benchmarking study in the network, and I was reviewing preliminary results last week. And one of the most striking things to me in the study was that we found 100% of advisors were raising their advisory fees in their first 3 years in the business. 100% raise their fee schedule in the first 3 years. Now, I know what some people are probably thinking. Of course, more experienced advisors command higher advisory fees because when you're more experienced, you have more skills and you can say you're worth more. But I'm not sure that's true, or at least that's not the right way to look at it. Because the other phenomenon that occurs that as advisors get more experience and more skills and their advisory firms get bigger, they also tend to move up market. They work with more affluent clients who just flat out write bigger checks because there are more dollars involved. Which means more experience is really actually more about helping you get larger, wealthier clients who pay bigger fees, not necessarily that you charge a higher fee schedule to those clients. And if anything, you'd actually expect that as advisors get more experience and move up market, their fees would decline because they're working with more affluent clients who tend to demand lower advisory fees because of the size of their portfolio. But that's not what we actually see in the data. As the advisors get more experience, they work with more affluent clients and tend to raise their fees from what they were charging in the early years. And so when I see a growing volume of advisors who snipe at the fees of other advisors, what it suggests to me is that there are still a lot of advisors out there who still aren't really confident in their own value. And as a result, they don't look at a situation like Dana as I would and say, wow, how do I focus and specialize and niche my advisory firm so I can command a 1.25% fee the way that Dana does and grow $100 million in 5 years? Instead, they ask, why wouldn't all of her clients just come work with me? Because I only charge 1% and she charges 1.25%. Why can't they see I'm less expensive and choose me instead? And frankly, I see the same thing occurring with the ongoing trend of advisors shifting to retainer fees as well. Annual retainers, income and net worth retainers, as an alternative to charging AUM fees. Now, I've written extensively in the past. I'm a hugely upbeat on the potential for retainer fees, including obviously the monthly retainer fee we champion XY Plying Network, because it opens up new potential client markets that just can't be served by AUM fees because they don't have the assets to be managed. That's why we focus on Gen X and Gen Y clients with a monthly retainer fee at XYPN. So there are folks that have income and financial wherewithal to pay for advice, but they have to pay for via a retainer fee because they don't have assets. And so retainer fees expands the market for financial planning into huge blue oceans of opportunity. But I think there's also a darker side of our industry shift to retainer fees. Advisors who charge a retainer fee instead of an AUM fee for clients who do have assets to manage on the basis that clients should prefer their fee structure to the AUM fee structure, which at its core to me is just another way of saying I'm not going to differentiate on my expertise, my specialization, my niche, or my value. I'm going to differentiate on price and use a pricing model that's different than my competitors. Even though, again, we still know in the long run, just differentiating on price usually doesn't work out so well. Now, again, I'm not trying to bash retainers fees here. I'm a champion of them. I've written at length about the opportunities that come from the growth in the retainer fee model. But if you're thinking about moving even this direction, be careful in thinking about why. Is it because you're trying to reach new clients who can't be served by the AUM model? Or is it because you're trying to use a pricing model as a differentiator with all the risks that come from doing so, instead of actually just trying to differentiate your value by creating a focus in your business? more generally, though, the key point here is just this. I think much of the advisor community is struggling with a collective crisis of confidence about the value of our advice in a world where all these investment products that we were trained in are becoming increasingly commoditized. Competition is getting tougher, differentiation is getting harder as the whole industry converges on that AUM model, especially under DOL fiduciary. All of that's true, but it doesn't mean the path forward is to differentiate on price and take shots at the pricing of other advisors. The path forward is to look at what successful advisors charge, especially if they do command an above average price, and try to learn what they're doing that works so well. How do they differentiate and show value to the point that clients are willing to pay that fee? And I think what you'll find is that the advisors who are succeeding in this area are the ones who specialize, go into niches, or find some way to differentiate themselves based on value beyond just trying to be the cheapest advisor or having a different pricing model than everyone else. So as we wrap up here, I hope you'll think about this in the context of your own advisory business as well. Are you really confident in the value you provide for the price that you charge? Are you growing the way that you want to be given the prices that you charge? And if you're not really confident in your value and you're not getting the fees that you want, you're not growing the way that you want, what do you have to do to find your confidence, refine your value, and truly differentiate yourself so that you can get growing again? This is Office Hours with Michael Kitces. We're normally 1 p.m. East Coast time on Tuesdays, although I'm traveling this week, as you can see from the background here. So thanks for hanging out with us Wednesday morning. Appreciate you joining us, and have a great day, everyone.